My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 46 years old, and just a few months ago, I was on the verge of making the biggest mistake of my life, not because of the woman I was about to marry, but because of the snake she calls a mother. As you're listening to this, my mother-in-law believes she destroyed my reputation and left me with nothing. What she doesn't realize is that she was the one who handed me the key to her own prison. They say betrayal is a dish best served cold. But when a woman tries to buy your dignity, using other women to set you up and secretly film you in a compromising situation the night before your wedding, the response can't be anything less than the complete demolition of her world. She thought I was weak, a boring architect who only knew blueprints and buildings. What she forgot is that someone who knows how to build also knows exactly which walls to knock down to make the entire structure collapse. Watching her smile inside the church, convinced I wouldn't show up, unaware that I already had the security camera footage and the bank transfers she personally signed, that was the most satisfying moment of my life. If you enjoy stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, leave a like and subscribe. Here, we share real stories of revenge and lessons no one forgets. To understand how we reached that point, I need to explain who I was before Beatrice's poison seeped into my life. I'm a man who values order. As an architect specializing in critical infrastructure, my job is to anticipate failures, calculate stress points, and make sure nothing collapses under pressure. I applied that same logic to my relationship with Emily. She was 20 years younger than me, a vibrant woman, a bit naive, but with a heart that felt genuine. We met at a business dinner, and for the first time in my life I allowed the carefully built structure of my solitude to crack. We had been together for 2 years. I gave her a life she had never imagined: travel, financial security, and a home designed down to the last millimeter. But the problem was never Emily. The problem was always her mother, Beatrice. From the first day I set foot in her house, I felt her evaluating stare. She didn't look at me like a future son-in-law. She looked at me like a bank account she couldn't control. Beatrice is a 60-year-old woman who survives on appearances, on a status she no longer has, and an arrogance that smells like cheap perfume and desperation. She tried to manipulate me from the start. First came subtle suggestions about family investments. Then came direct requests for loans to cover endless credit card debt. I responded with the cold clarity that defines me. I told her my commitment was to her daughter, not to her decaying lifestyle. That was my unforgivable sin in her eyes. In her mind, a man of my age and position should be a silent ATM. The moment I denied her control over my money, I became her enemy. As the wedding date approached, the atmosphere grew heavy. Beatrice shifted from open hostility to a fake kindness that made my skin crawl. She inserted herself into every detail of the event. I watched her movements with the same attention I give a crack in a foundation. I noticed how she whispered into Emily's ear, how she tried to plant doubts about my fidelity, using my maturity and work trips as ammunition. Emily, trapped between the man she loved and the woman who gave her life, simply lowered her head. I wanted the wedding to be perfect for Emily. I spent a small fortune on a private vineyard, a luxury banquet, and a dress that cost more than her mother's car. But Beatrice didn't want to see her daughter happy. She wanted me out of the picture so she could reclaim her influence. My financial stability was a threat to her emotional control. I represented Emily's independence, and Beatrice could not allow that. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, the pressure intensified. Beatrice called me constantly to discuss details, but the conversations always drifted toward how much she had sacrificed and how I should secure the family's future through trusts where she would have a say. My answer was always a firm, calm no. I remember one afternoon in her living room. She sipped tea and stared at me with reptilian eyes. She said nothing, but the way she clenched the cup told me everything. The silence in that house wasn't peace, it was the void before an explosion. I believed my intelligence and analytical mind protected me. I thought that by controlling everything financially and legally, she had no weapons to hurt me. I was wrong to underestimate the cruelty of someone with nothing left to lose but her pride. She knew my weak point was my reputation, my moral integrity. I'm a man of rigid principles. and she decided to use that against me, fabricating a scenario designed not only to cancel the wedding, but to destroy me socially. The stage was set. Emily was excited. The suite was ready and guests were already arriving at nearby hotels. I was exhausted from work, but satisfied. I felt I was finally about to build the family I never had. In the shadows, however, Beatrice had already contacted the right people, rented the necessary equipment and prepared the trap. She didn't want money anymore. She wanted my public humiliation. She wanted Emily to see me as something dirty, so that after the breakup, she could reclaim her place as the center of her daughter's universe. Everything was ready for the bachelor party, one she herself, in a supposed gesture of goodwill, offered to organize through a family friend. I accepted out of courtesy, unaware that I was walking straight into a slaughterhouse designed specifically for my character. The night of the so-called bachelor party was a meticulously planned ambush. Beatrice insisted that given my age and my social circle, a loud, chaotic party wouldn't be appropriate. She suggested an intimate gathering at a private property, supposedly organized by a distant cousin of Emily. Wanting to keep the peace before the big day, I agreed. I arrived alone. There were no friends, no music, just a heavy atmosphere, and 3 women waiting for me with rehearsed smiles. The moment I stepped inside, my survival instinct kicked in. The air smelled like a mix of cheap incense and a sweet perfume, trying to hide something rotten. The women introduced themselves as a surprise entertainment hired by my future mother-in-law. They offered me a drink. I accepted it, but barely touched it. In my profession, you learn to read structures, and that situation had no solid foundation. I noticed hidden cameras in the upper corners of the room, small red lights blinking between the decorations. What followed was a pathetic attempt at forced seduction. The women, clearly following a script, tried to surround me, unbutton my shirt, create a scene that, filmed from the right angle, would look like a wild orgy. I remained still, my hands visible, maintaining a cold composure that seemed to confuse them. There were no raised voices from me, just silent observation of how low human behavior can sink for a bit of money. The next morning, the wedding day, the poison started to spread. I didn't receive a call from Emily. I received a message from Beatrice, photos, screenshots from the night before, expertly edited to make it look like I was actively participating. Along with the images came a short message. If you don't transfer ownership of the beach house to my name today, Emily will receive the full video before she walks down the aisle. The extortion was crude, but effective for someone who didn't know how to play chess. I went to Emily's house. I needed to look her in the eyes. When I arrived, Beatrice was there, blocking the entrance like a guard dog. Emily was crying in the background, her wedding dress half laid over a chair. Beatrice looked at me with premature triumph. She didn't let me in. She shouted that I was disgusting, a perverted old man who didn't deserve her daughter. Emily looked at me from a distance, with a disappointment that burned through me. Not because of what she thought I'd done, but because she trusted her mother's lies more than the 2 years we had built together. Beatrice pulled out her phone and, right in front of me, threatened to press send to all our contacts if I didn't meet her financial demands. At that moment, I felt absolute calm. This was total loss. My fiancé looked at me with hatred. My wedding was collapsing. My reputation was one click away from destruction. Beatrice dismissed me from their lives with a gesture of contempt, slamming the door in my face while screaming that I was nothing to them anymore. I stood on the sidewalk, listening to Emily's sobs from inside. That's when I realized the relationship hadn't died that morning. It had died long before, the moment I allowed Beatrice a seat at our table. The humiliation was public. Guests were already being informed that the wedding was cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances. I lost the money spent on the celebration. I lost the woman I loved, and supposedly I lost my honor. I walked to my car without looking back. My silence wasn't defeat. It was data processing. Beatrice thought she had taken everything from me. In reality, she had only relieved me of the weight of a toxic family. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Being expelled from that home, from that future I had planned, was the catalyst. She wanted war. And I am a man who designs structures meant to withstand earthquakes. She was nothing more than a gust of wind, trying to bring down a concrete building. The betrayal was complete. The injustice was absolute. And my response began to take shape the very moment I turned the engine on. The counterattack wasn't an impulse of anger, it was an engineering project. That same afternoon, when I returned to my empty office, while the guests were still wondering what had happened at the vineyard, I turned on my computer and began breaking down the structure of Beatrice's life. People like her always leave cracks behind. They believe they're untouchable because they operate through emotion and chaos. I operate through logic and records. My first step was calling Jonathan Reed, an old friend and a criminal defense attorney who specializes in cybercrime and extortion. I didn't look to him for comfort, I looked for legal precision. We met in a neutral location. I showed him Beatrice's extortion message and the photos she had sent me herself. Jonathan smiled with a coldness that matched my own. "Daniel," he said, "she just confessed to a serious felony in a fully traceable digital format. But I didn't want a simple police report that would disappear into a filing cabinet. I wanted her to feel the full weight of the building collapsing on her shoulders. Over the next 2 weeks, I dedicated myself to reconstructing everything Beatrice had tried to hide for years. I hired a private investigator to track her finances. What we uncovered was worse than expected. Beatrice wasn't just bankrupt, she had been siphoning money from the savings account I had created for Emily. She had forged her own daughter's signature to pay off gambling debts and maintain that illusion of fallen aristocracy. She didn't want to destroy my wedding just for control. The urgency came from the fact that once we were married, I would gain full access to audits of Emily's assets, and her fraud would be exposed. While she paraded around her social club, spreading twisted stories about my perversion and how she had saved her daughter from a monster, I was collecting evidence. I obtained statements from the 3 women she had hired. It turned out Beatrice never paid them the full amount she had promised. Resentment is a powerful ally. With a modest payment and the guarantee that they wouldn't face legal trouble if they cooperated, the women handed over the original unedited footage from the hidden cameras. In those videos, it was crystal clear. I rejected them, kept my distance, and most importantly, you could hear one of them say on the phone, "Beatrice, he's not taking the bait. We're doing what we can to make it look real." My reconstruction plan wasn't about defending myself. It was a controlled demolition. I prepared a digital and physical dossier. Every money transfer, every extortion message, every second of unedited footage, every falsified document she had used to steal from her own daughter. I had the patience of a hunter. I knew Beatrice was planning her next move, convincing Emily to sell a piece of land her father had left her, so Beatrice could manage it and erase her tracks. I chose to wait for the moment of maximum vulnerability. From a distance, I watched Emily sink into sadness, manipulated by a mother who smothered her with fake affection while quietly reaching into her pockets. I didn't feel pity. I felt icy determination. Justice isn't a feeling, it's a scale. For me to regain my peace, Beatrice had to lose her freedom, both financial and social. Jonathan and I prepared the lawsuits: extortion, defamation, fraud, and document forgery. But we wouldn't file them quietly in an empty courthouse just yet. First, I made sure that all of Beatrice's friends, that nest of vipers fueled by gossip, received an invitation to a small clarification of facts. There were no screams, no unnecessary public confrontations. Everything was surgical. The blueprint was complete. The materials were ready, and the detonator was in my hand. Beatrice thought she had left me with nothing. In reality, I was simply clearing the ground so I could build her ruin. The climax of my plan didn't unfold in a dark office, but in the place where Beatrice felt most powerful, a charity gala she herself had helped organize to cleanse her image after the scandal of the cancelled wedding. She stood there holding a glass of wine, surrounded by the same people she had told that I was a depraved man. Emily was beside her, her expression lifeless, once again being used as a trophy of manufactured victimhood. I walked into the hall without an invitation, but with an authority that brought every conversation to a halt. My presence cut through the room like a blast of cold air. When Beatrice saw me, she attempted one final display of righteous outrage. She marched toward me with her index finger raised, ready to scream that I had no right to be there. Before she could utter a single word, I pulled a tablet from my briefcase and connected it to the venue's projection system, a system I had personally donated months earlier. "Beatrice, stay quiet," I said calmly, "and observe the structure of your lies." The giant screen lit up. In front of everyone she knew, the unedited footage from the bachelor party began to play. The room fell into a deathly silence as the hired woman's voice confirmed that Beatrice was the one giving orders to frame me. But I wasn't finished. Next came the bank statements, highlighted in red, revealing how Beatrice had drained Emily's inheritance. The transfer dates aligned perfectly with her casino debts and luxury purchases. Beatrice's face shifted from furious red to deathly pale. She scanned the room for support and found none, only eyes filled with contempt. Her friends stepped back as if she were contagious. At her side, Emily released her mother's arm, the way one drops a burning coal. That was the moment justice took its purest form. Jonathan Reed, my attorney, entered the hall accompanied by 2 police officers. There was no drama, no shouting. He calmly handed over the evidence: extortion, forged signatures, financial fraud. The officers approached Beatrice. She resisted, screaming that it was all a setup, that I was persecuting her. It was a pathetic display. Watching her being escorted out, the handcuffs hidden beneath her designer coat, was the exact moment the structure she had built on lies finally collapsed. Emily tried to approach me, tears filling her eyes, an apology trembling on her lips. She searched for the man who had loved her, the man who had always protected her, but I was no longer there for her. I felt no hatred, not even pain, only absolute indifference. I stepped back when she reached for my arm. "How you had 2 years to know me, Emily," I said without emotion, "but it took you 5 minutes to believe her. Enjoy the loneliness your mother left you." I walked toward the exit as chaos erupted behind me. I had reclaimed my name, my money, and my dignity. Beatrice would spend the coming years facing criminal charges and complete financial ruin. My civil lawsuits ensured she would never see another cent, neither from me nor from her daughter's inheritance. The satisfaction wasn't in watching her cry. It was in seeing reality strike her with the same cold precision she had tried to use to destroy me. She believed intelligent people were easy to manipulate because they have so much to lose. What she forgot is that intelligence also teaches you this. Sometimes you have to burn down the entire forest to eliminate the serpent. Months after that night, the dust has finally settled over the ruins of what was once my personal life. Beatrice couldn't escape the inevitable. Her lawyers tried to argue that everything she did was an act of maternal protection, but the evidence of financial fraud and the testimonies of the women she hired were nails too heavy for her legal coffin. Today, she faces a sentence that will remind her, every single day behind concrete walls, that the price of greed and slander is freedom. There are no luxuries, no social events, only the echo of her own lies. Emily has tried to reach me. Emails, voicemails. She even showed up at my office once. She spoke of regret, of how she had been blinded by the person she trusted most. I listened to her one last time, only to close the chapter. She was expecting forgiveness, a reconciliation scene worthy of a romantic movie. But I am a man who understands structures. Once steel fatigues and foundations crack that deeply, the building is no longer safe. The love I felt for her wasn't destroyed by her mother. It was destroyed by her own lack of character. I left her sitting in that cafe without offering my hand. There is no hatred in me, but there is no room for weakness either. I recovered every cent invested in that failed wedding through civil lawsuits. My professional reputation is stronger than ever. My clients value integrity, and now they know I am a man who does not break under pressure. I return to my life of order. Blueprints, calculations, precision. Sometimes I walk through the city and look at buildings that appear perfect from the outside. I know many of them hide structural flaws that will eventually cause them to collapse. Beatrice's life was one of those buildings. I simply accelerated the process. I don't feel like a hero. I don't claim to be a moral example. I am simply a man who refused to be a victim. I learned that trust is a luxury not everyone deserves, and that family isn't always defined by blood, but by loyalty when the lights go out. People ask me if I feel lonely. I tell them I prefer the solitude of a solid structure to the company found in a house of cards. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching life collect its debts. I just took a front row seat as fate presented the bill. If this story felt as intense to you as it was for me to live it, leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories.